Okay, so I wanted to do a long and a short version of this for this video because I tried to give people a tutorial in Stellarium so they could repeat what I did just in case they wanted to try and prove it to themselves, and I also just gave a whole lot more detail and plots. But so this is just the quick down and dirty. I mentioned in a previous video I was going to try and answer the question of where time begins, and I mean, I think the question really was, is the solstice event and equinox event, do these happen in a moment of time, or are they a day-long event? Like when I read Enoch, he seems to say, you know, these seasonal days are days and not moments, and so I imagine that means the sun kind of, you know, it does something special for the entire day. Maybe it travels in the same circuit for one extra day or something. But it seems modern science dominates by saying, you know, these events, solstice and equinox events, happen in a moment of time. And so I wanted to do a two-phase experiment to answer that question. I wanted to see what Stellarium is programmed for, and I wanted to see, you know, phase 2 will be to network with truth seekers around the world to see, you know, if it is so, if it's a moment or if it's a day-long event. And so with Stellarium, I was able to, and again in the long version of this video, I will explain how I did it if you want to try and repeat what I did or get more detail and more thoughts about all this. But the short and the quick of it is I was able to figure out how to look at coordinate data for the location of the sun in the sky, which is similar to how I've been looking for shadow data on the ground patterns for the different time of year to figure out the solstice event. But with Stellarium, it goes down to a very fine decimal point, and keep in mind its program software might not reflect reality, but that's just phase 1 of the experiment, just to see what it says. Excuse me. But so Stellarium does give a very fine-tuned coordinate, and so I was able to zero in on the coordinates and figure out where and when and where the sun hit its most extreme point. You know, would that be the international date line? For those of you who aren't familiar, the international date line is where the quote-unquote, well, it's where modern science says time begins. It's where the day cycle begins, the 24-hour clock cycle begins, and it's, I guess, where the year begins as well, is the international date line, fictitious location picked out in the Pacific Ocean. It isn't even a straight line. So it's obviously not quite right. I mean, if you look at the shape of the international date line, you can tell, I mean, man just made that puppy up. Like, so, but I mean, and so the question of where time begins can be a big deal on potentially when you're trying to figure out the start of the year or the start of your day. And like people who live around the international date line actually have a really tough time with this. I've seen some online discussion boards about it, and like they don't know which day to keep their Sabbath because, you know, if you live on the right or left side of that line, even in Australia, like it, you know, and some people think, well, time should begin in Jerusalem, but so this is kind of a big deal if you lived on the left and right side of like this line that time begins on, because it's like when does time begin? Like, you know, and when do I begin my day? And some people are keeping Sabbath a day early or a day late because of it. And you just got to kind of stop for a minute and think about how that works. But anyway, so I wanted to answer this question, and I looked at Stellarium, was looking at coordinate data just to see where the sun hit its most extreme position. And I did it for the year 2018 first, and that year showed that it happened over the longitude of the tail of Japan. I was looking at the latitude of the Anchorage, Alaska, but I just say the tail of Japan just to give people a point of reference along that latitude line. But so it was in 2018. Well, according to Stellarium, it looks like in 2018 the extreme solstice, December solstice event happened on, I think, the 21st. I'll have a picture showing the summary of the data. But and it happened on the 21st over Japan, and so that confirmed it was it looked like it was a moment of time, and so I did it the next year in 2019, and it jumped. It wasn't the same location. The extreme moment happened, I think, over Egypt, and the year after that, the extreme moment happened over like Nova Scotia, over like Maine in the United States kind of area, and so and I saw this pattern where it seemed to be jumping like 25% of the map each year, and so. And I did it for like 4 years to try and see if there was like this leap year cycle, just to look at the quote-unquote leap year cycle and what it was doing. And one of those years, the date did play around. Like, I think 3 of the years it said it happened on the 21st, but then one of the years it said it happened on the 22nd. But so to wrap this one up, again, this is just phase 1 to see what Stellarium does. Phase 2 will be to actually try and observe it, network with truth seekers around the world to see what's going on. The question is still potential on the table if it is a moment event or a day event. But Stellarium appears to be saying it's a moment event, and Stellarium appears to be saying that moment changes every year. So like the clock, according to Stellarium, happens, the clock, the creator's clock, the timepiece, according to Stellarium, starts the day and the year, starts the year, definitely. It changes every year, according to Stellarium. And it doesn't look, when I went all the way around, so like I said, it was the tail of Japan, and then it was Egypt, and then Nova Scotia. When I came all the way back around, it wasn't over the tail of Japan again. It was somewhere else. And so I think that has to do with Stellarium being programmed to like the 365.25. I think it's the 0.25 that's causing this location of this extreme coordinate to shift about 25% of the map. And so that's just preliminary food for thought. That's phase 1. That's what Stellarium says. It's just program software, might not be reality. So phase 2 will be doing this in real life, but in that video, I'll have to explain more about that later if I ever, when we get a chance to do that. But I will be also releasing a longer version of this video shortly that kind of goes into a lot more detail describing all this. So anyway, food for thought. Shalom, and Yah bless as you continually seek His truth in love with a pure heart.